Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Danielle Hargenrader here, really excited today to bring you an interview with Emily Coles. And as we usually do here, I'm going to read her bio and we're going to get right into her story. So, Emily Coles was diagnosed with diabetes too young to remember anything but sitting on the kitchen floor and hearing her mom call her dad on the rotary telephone to say, "Meet us at the hospital." 37 years later, Emily is a happy, active, and healthy person with diabetes. She works at Diabetes Hands Foundation as head of communities for 2 online social networks for people touched by diabetes and community manager of TuDiabetes specifically. In addition to her work at Diabetes Hands Foundation, Emily has been teaching and competing in ballroom dance for many years. That's pretty awesome. And has recently discovered a love of biking. She lives in San Francisco with her girlfriend and their dog, who cannot smell low blood sugar at all. Thank you for joining us, Emily. That was a pretty good little bio there. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you, Danielle. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. So yeah, that was a pretty funny bio. I'm sorry your dog is not a diabetes alert dog, but I'm sure nonetheless offers you quite a bit of comfort.
Definitely. You know, I initially started hanging out with this dog. I didn't adopt him at first. He was like a tester dog because I was thinking of getting a diabetes alert dog. I started to experience some really scary low blood sugars at night and nervous about it, and my family was getting nervous about it. And so I thought, well, maybe I should look into getting an alert dog. I was already wearing even a CGM at that time, but I was missing the alerts some of the time. And then I thought, well, I haven't owned a dog as an adult, and I don't even know, like, am I up for the responsibility of dog ownership, even aside from an alert dog, just like any dog. And so I thought, well, I'm going to be really responsible about how I get into this. And so I went to the local SPCA and I said, you know, I just want to like foster a dog while you're looking for a permanent placement. And I'm allergic to dogs, and so is my girlfriend. So I needed one of those hypoallergenic dogs that don't shed or whatever, wiry-haired dogs. And so I went in and I had this very specific need of a dog that would not cause me to have allergy attacks. And they had like 2 dogs that fit that bill. And so I was like, I don't know, just like hand me a dog. I mean, I'm just fostering to have it for like a month. Just like give me a dog. God, it doesn't even really matter. I'm just making sure that I'm up for the challenge of having a dog. And so they gave me this cute little dog that was like completely matted with crud and dirt. Like I couldn't even see what the poor thing looked like. And I took it home and I scrubbed it up and I was like, it's a pretty cute dog.
Aww.
And of course, like a month later, I'm like, I love my dog so much.
Of course.
I could never take him back. And so there went my dream of a diabetic alert dog because I didn't want to have 2 and I needed to keep this little guy. And so now I still have him, and he has expressed absolutely no interest whatsoever in my diabetes.
Well, I think the universe, you know, puts things in our kind of path for a reason, and it sounds like it's a really good fit. So it probably worked out for the best either way. So I was going to say, I won't even get into the story. My cat came into my life kind of the same way. I just found her, and then I was like, oh, cool, I'll have this cat. She's not a diabetic alert cat at all. But yeah, no. So let's talk more about you. Obviously, you love your dog, which is something that I love that you love because I'm an animal freak. But so tell us a little bit. Obviously, when, you know, from your bio, we know when you were diagnosed, you were kind of too young to really be comprehending much because you were a child, a young sitting on the floor child. But why don't you tell a little bit about your path, you know, from what you can remember to where you are now? And whatever you feel like sharing on that road.
Well, it's been a long road because I've had diabetes for 37 years. So I was diagnosed when I was 3, and I didn't know anybody else who had diabetes growing up. I lived in a town in central Pennsylvania, and my parents just did, I think, a really amazing job of sort of trying to normalize diabetes for me and for the rest of the family. I have 2 older siblings, neither of whom have diabetes. And so I just grew up with it as part of my self-concept. And I didn't particularly feel like, even though I didn't know anybody else who had diabetes, I didn't particularly feel like it made me stand out that much from my peers. It was just sort of one of my qualities in among a variety of qualities. I'm stubborn and I have a bad temper and I don't know, but I'm friendly. Like, you know, we all have all of our qualities.
Yeah.
And that was just one of them. My parents did at some point make an effort to find me a peer with diabetes, and they actually had to go as far as a town that was a 2-hour drive from us. But they found another little girl who was around my age and also had type 1. And they thought, you know, we should get Emily together with this little girl so that she has a peer in this experience. And it turned out I really hated that little I thought she was mean and nasty, and who cared that she had diabetes? She was not fun to hang out with. And I don't remember ever having a conversation with her about what it was like to have diabetes. Yeah. Or, you know, we didn't connect on like, we feel different from the other kids, or these are our fears and our hopes and dreams. Nothing like that. We just, you know, we were little kids and we just wanted to play, and I hated playing with her. So we didn't really bother with that 2-hour drive very many times.
Yeah, sure. Why would you? Yeah, I was going to say, like, even though like, I feel like a lot of people that you find out someone else has diabetes, you're like, oh, you know, we're going to connect. But the bottom line is this: people are people, whether you have diabetes or not, and you don't get along with every person that you meet. So you guys, that wasn't a good personality mesh situation.
That was not a match. And at that time, having diabetes, I think, wasn't all that important to either of us. It wasn't sort of a crucial piece of our self-understanding or self-identity for either of us. And so that made it not enough to connect the two of us in any way. So then I grew up. I went through high school. I went through college. I still didn't know anyone else who had diabetes this whole entire time. And I didn't seek out people with diabetes. I didn't feel like I need someone with whom to commiserate, or someone who is who understands what I mean when I say my blood sugar was low, who understands what that feels like. Somehow I did not feel like that connection was missing in my life until I got a lot older. Mm-hmm. And it was roughly, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago now that I kind of started to feel like, you know, I'd like to work with people who have diabetes. I actually feel like just through my experiences and my life with it, I have something to share with other people and maybe offer support or companionship of some kind. And so I started, at that point, I was teaching ballroom dance as my main gig. And I started to think about whether I could start some kind of program of dance classes specifically for people with chronic conditions, not just diabetes, but I was thinking, you know, there's an experience to having a condition that isn't ever going to go away. Yeah. That I think is kind of unique, and certainly dancing could be very therapeutic. I mean, that would be, yeah. You know, the social connection and the physical health and, you know, all of that. Feeling good is good for us. Yep. We all have personally, I feel like having diabetes is kind of a chronic downer. Not because it's horrible all the time, but we have these reminders all through the day. I mean, even now I'm checking my blood sugar and it's tanking. Hey, what great timing.
What is your blood sugar right now?
It's 116 and falling straight down.
I'm 118. I'm 118 and I'm straight across. Yeah, but it's funny. We're like synced up. We've just been talking for 10 minutes.
Totally synced up. Except that I'm about to have a problem, and hopefully you're not about to have a problem. No. I'm gonna grab my glucose tabs.
Yeah, get your glucose tabs. Absolutely. I always say that too. I have my glucose gel sitting here just in case, because you never know.
But I feel like I get these sort of reminders throughout the day that I have something that can be of concern at any time.
I think what you said is important to say. It's not horrible all the time, but it's just all the time.
Yeah.
It's just all the time. Like that's, even if it's not horrible all the time, it's just happening all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I felt like dance, you know, that's something that that can make us feel happy, that creates the release of some serotonin, which in some of our, you know, our happy hormones make us feel good. And I feel like that's particularly important for people who have chronic conditions to keep their eye on, like, do I do things that make me feel happy to kind of combat the potential downer of my chronic condition? So I looked into that for a while, and to be honest, I'm not a good business person. I love dancing and I love teaching dance, but the business end of it totally didn't appeal to me, like having to market myself and coming up with sort of promotions, and I didn't love that piece. I think it happens a lot to people who go into business for themselves doing something that they love, and then they discover like, oh, poo, now I have to do QuickBooks, and that wasn't the thing that I love.
And I won't even tell you how much I hate QuickBooks. I mean, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I mean, even in college, I started out my degree in small business management with an entrepreneurial focus, but then I ended up in Bachelor's of Nutrition. But I'll tell you what, and even to this day, I own a business and I actually enjoy most of the business side, but it's just funny that you said, it's like I have an internal fight with myself every single month when I sit down to do QuickBooks. I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I do it anyway because like I'm so passionate about sustaining my business because that's like my thing, but it sucks, and it does suck. So.
And you didn't go into your business in order to be a business person per se.
No. I went into my business because I was passionate about sharing my passion to help other people, you know, be whatever better version of themselves that they wanted to be. And in the beginning, it wasn't just that I was working with people with diabetes, but after like, I've been in business now for about 6 or 7 years, but in my like second year, and not to sound crass, but I was like, I don't really care that much about working with anybody that doesn't have diabetes. I only really want to help people who have diabetes. So
I love that honesty.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, I do. I care, and I mean, I would help anybody that came to me, but my passion just lies in, it's like, great, I'm a nutritionist, I'm a personal trainer, and the bottom line is this: the same exact things as, and I mean, more than anything, I'm a psychologist because I run like a pretty deep dive, you know, program of coaching that it's like, we're not just going to learn how to eat and exercise. We're going to learn why we feel like we don't deserve to treat ourselves with the love and respect that we do deserve. But at the bottom line is, whether you have diabetes or you don't, the rules are almost completely the same as far as what we should be eating and how we should be moving. It doesn't matter. But for me,
what
the satisfaction
and body healthy and what doesn't.
Exactly. Bottom line. But for me, it's just like my fulfillment in life comes from helping people with diabetes, obviously, because I went through a huge struggle with my health. And the underlying thing that you kind of said, that, I mean, throughout all the interviews that I've done, one thing that every single person has said is that we didn't know anybody else who had diabetes until much later in life. Like, we just didn't know of anyone, and it wasn't even a thing. But like, once we kind of found that connection with the other person, whatever, through whatever means it would be, it's almost like, oh, it would kind of suck without it, you know. And that's why I love the diabetes online community, especially what you do with TuDiabetes, because it's like, that's like the huge conduit to kind of building those relationships. So it's awesome. You know,
something that I didn't realize existed, and until I started working at Diabetes Hands Foundation, and I think it's something that probably didn't exist until the DOC started to exist, is that there's a culture.
Yeah.
For people. There's a culture around having diabetes, and there's a culture among people who have diabetes that I think it can be a really subtle thing, but it's really there. You know, you get together a bunch of people with diabetes, of any type of diabetes, and there is, because of a common experience, there's a culture that exists between us that doesn't exist when I get together with a group of my friends who do not have diabetes. Obviously, we have, you know, other things in common, and we have our own, you know, if it's a group of friends who I know through bicycling, we have bicycle culture, and or a group of friends who I know because we're all gay. We have our gay culture in common, but there is a diabetes culture which I love, and I'm so glad that I know now that exists, because before working at DHF and before managing TuDiabetes, where obviously like that's what that community is about being part of that culture.
So
it's
yeah,
beautiful.
I was gonna say, so how did you, so you said like when you got later on, like, you know, maybe in your late 20s, you kind of started realizing that you wanted to have that maybe connection with other people. So how did it go from you realizing that you kind of wanted it to you being where you are now as like head of, you know, TuDiabetes, like being kind of not, you know, the liaison between bringing all of these people together to be able to do this. You're kind of like the head of it. So how did that take place?
Weird that happened. Well, you know, after a while, I decided that doing it through teaching dance actually wasn't going to be the thing for me. That I actually wanted to step out of my dance teacher role and just look at, you know, how can I work with other people who have diabetes? And I started by taking a lot of people out for lunch who did work in different aspects of diabetes and saying like, so what do you do? And do you love it? And how did you get to where you are in doing it today? I mean, I talked with endocrinologists, and I was not interested in going to medical school at that point. I wasn't thinking like, maybe I'll be an endocrinologist. But I really wanted to know, like, what's the variety of roles within this field? I find a role that I can fill. And eventually somebody actually just told me about TuDiabetes, and at the time Diabetes Hands Foundation needed a program manager. They had actually advertised that they were hiring and looking for a program manager, and I was like, I don't know anything about that.
But I could.
Prior experience or training to bring there to this position, other than that I have diabetes, and as a dance teacher, I've been working with people, and this is a position that involves working with people. So, you know, maybe I do have some skills that I could bring to this position, even though it doesn't seem like sort of a direct match for what I've done in the past. And so I met with Manny Hernandez, the co-founder of Diabetes Hands Foundation, and we hit it off. Yeah, basically is how it happened. That I was, you know, I was someone who lived locally, had diabetes, was interested in the position, and I think he probably thought the skills, particularly the technical skills. It was the techie stuff that I really didn't know. Like, I can talk with people, and I can be supportive, and I can talk about diabetes. I did not know how to log on to any, like, I had an email account, and that's kind of as technical as I was at that point. So I had a really steep learning curve to get to a place where I could like manage the back end of the website, and some people might argue that I could still use a couple classes on that. But so that was really the steep learning curve for me, was the technical stuff. But learning the community was just nothing but, there was a lot to learn, but it was just pure joy and very natural.
And I said, there's a bunch of things that you said that like really stuck out to me. One that I love that you said about how you knew you wanted to be involved, but you didn't know how. So you just went out to lunch with people. And it's kind of funny because it's like, it's similar to what I'm doing with these interview series, although I already know what I wanted to do, but it's like, I know that I wanted to hear more about other people's experiences, not only for myself, because for me, I'm like, I consider myself a lifelong learner. Like, I always feel like if I meet somebody for whatever reason, I believe that they were put there to teach me something, and it could be something really important or something whatever, but I believe that we meet people, just even if you feel like it's by chance, that's fine. But I think there's a learning opportunity in every situation if you're just willing to believe that that's possible. So it's like, you know, you're out there and you're talking to the endocrinologist, or you're talking to the blogger, or you're talking to whoever, but it's like you're learning some little tidbit of information through all these people, and it's kind of helping you you know, form through your awareness, you know, what sounds good to you and what doesn't. And this kind of happenstance. And then you just happen to meet Manny. And it's like, that kind of stuff happens all the time. It's like, I just happened to meet the love of my life in a nightclub in Cancun, Mexico. What? Like, you know what I mean? Like that was, we're coming up on our 8-year wedding anniversary next month. But that's the thing. It's like, wow. It's like you just, I don't take any meeting by chance, because it's like, and maybe it is, and maybe it's totally random and there's nothing major that's going to come of it. But I think you could like kind of, I feel like you were just open to the possibility that something could manifest. Like you just don't know what it might be. And you were just willing to do that. And the other part too about the tech side is like, I'm a big believer in, you gotta, even if you don't have the experience, to get experience, you have to do. Like you can't just get experience by reading a book. It's like, great, you could read every book on building a website in the entire world, but until you get into building a website, who cares? Like, so I think it was like, I think that's such a perfect, and on all accounts, in my, you know, in my interpretation, just the way that worked out, it was so awesome. So I thought that's great. So now you do that. And so obviously you find like tons of joy in bringing people together. So, you know, for you, and I like to talk about this with people, and of course you can share what you will, but like for you, obviously you said growing up, you know, you didn't feel like diabetes like made you stick out or made you different from everybody else. But like, was there any particular struggle that you perceived to have gone through, maybe related to diabetes, that, you know, maybe that you're still going through, or that you've overcome in some way that you kind of think other people are also going through, or maybe you see it on the forums a lot. It's like, or whatever it is. But usually during the interviews, I like to try to get people to share a little bit about themselves.
I had a tremendous struggle as a teenager and into my 20s with food. I developed a compulsive overeating disorder as a teenager. And I feel like I even know like the moment when the seed was planted, because when I was 12, I had this great friend named Alyssum, who had been like my absolute bestie growing up. And this was around, at 12 is around the time when I started to really take over my own diabetes management from my parents. And until then, I had, you know, a very specific regimen of like, this is what I eat, and this is when I eat it, and this is how much insulin I do, and this is when I do my shot and shots. And when I was about 12, I had this epiphany that if I strayed from that plan, I didn't cease to exist, and I didn't fall over dead. Like I could stray from that plan, and like my day went on. My blood sugar might not be what I wanted it to be. I might not feel very well. I might need to do an extra injection. But like it almost hadn't occurred to me before that I could stray from that plan. And when I realized that it was possible to do that, I started inventing these sort of adventures for myself that were farther and farther afield of my eating plan. And so I would, and I started to fantasize like, I'm going to eat ice cream sundaes covered in gummy bears and coconut sprinkles. And I mean, I got into this sort of food fantasy world. And I think it was because it had never occurred to me before that I could stray from eating, you know, at that point we were given a Weight Watchers, in those days, a Weight Watchers plan, basically. So it was, you know, I get a milk exchange and a bread exchange and a protein and whatever. And I was like, I have no idea what exchanges are in my ice cream sundae fantasy. And it doesn't matter because it's a fantasy and I can just enjoy it as much as I want. And when I was about 12, I started to live out those fantasies through giant bowls of ice cream with chocolate, with anything I could find that was sweet and delicious to pile into my fantasy bowl that I was actually consuming in real life.
That was no longer a fantasy, it was reality.
It was a fantasy that I was able to make real. And it was like, it was seriously an epiphany for me. And it was an epiphany that very quickly turned into a really big problem and something that I lost control over. And just, it started to be something I indulged in alone late at night when no one else was looking, raiding the kitchen, laying waste, not just raiding, laying waste to the kitchen, where my mother would come down in the morning and be like, what happened? Did a raccoon get into the house? What happened in here last night? And of course, she started to get really concerned about me. And I wanted her to leave me the hell alone because I am living out my fantasy of eating whatever I want, whenever I want, stepping outside of this regimented plan that I had. So that got a hold of me for, I would say, about 10 years. And of course, eventually turned into something that I sought therapy for and I sought help for, because it became clear that this is no longer a fun and exciting fantasy. This is a food addiction and a real problem. And I'm waking up horribly sick every morning and vowing to myself that I won't do it again, and then doing it again and waking up horribly sick and just repeating that after a while, almost every day. And so it became sort of, instead of a fantasy, it was a nightmare.
Yeah. Oh, so, I mean, and this is funny. I mean, not funny, but I do, you know, I find out so much about the people I interview that I didn't know. And it's another underlying theme that I find with a lot of people that I interview is this eating issue, no matter what way it manifests. And for me, and I didn't realize how eerily similar our paths were, but I had the exact same kind of thing, but it manifested a little differently. It was when I was 12. My father passed away the day after my 12th birthday. I had had diabetes for about 4 years at that point. And kind of our little nuclear family that was like great, just like kind of exploded. And then all of a sudden my whole reality was different. And then I went into this depression that was fueled by binge eating that happened in private, but I didn't raid the kitchen. I actually, because then my mom had to go to work like a lot more to kind of make sure, you know, her child who had diabetes had health insurance, and that, so she was working all the time. So I was, you know, had an allowance. So I'd go to the pharmacy and I'd buy like anything I wanted, candy and Oreos, and I'd stash them under my bed, and I'd eat loads and loads of, and it wasn't a fantasy for me. It was like a comfort. It was like, okay, well, everything else sucks, but I'm just going to be able to eat whatever I want, and it doesn't matter.
Oreos are tasty.
What's that?
Everything sucks, but Oreos are tasty.
Exactly. And yeah, so, and that's kind of for me, and it lasted about 10 years, probably 8 years or so for me, like in that range. But then for me, you know, it manifested, you know, lots of weight gain and A1Cs that were, you know, in the 14-15% range for a really long time. And just the realization that, you know, this is an addiction. Like, I'm doing this in private. And when people ask me about, you know, my mom wondered why I was gaining so much weight. And, you know, back then we didn't really have the internet until much later, until I was probably 16. At that point, it had been already going on for 4 years. So she thought, oh, well, you know, diabetes, it must have to do with the diabetes, the weight gain and the insulin. And she didn't know because I wasn't really telling her, because when I was around her and normal, like I would just eat normal. I would just eat like I wouldn't do that. And I had to, you know, kind of get a lot of help from a lot of different sources to kind of overcome that. And I always tell people still to this day, it's like, I have to still do like mental tricks and things like that. Cause it's like, sometimes I'll be shopping and I'll like be near the bakery section and I'll be like, I'll smell it. And like some trigger gets like triggered and I'm like, no. And it's a thing. It's like, do I never eat like bad food? No, of course I eat bad food. Like when I feel like it, you know, but it doesn't become like a compulsive thing that I do in private. It's like, okay, once a week, I'm going to have whatever I feel like having and I'm going to bolus for it. And it's not going to be a big deal versus like, I have to hide this and it's so taboo and I can't do it. It's like this, but yeah, I have to, you know, rationalize with myself. It's like, is this going to be worth your blood sugar being like really high for the next 2 days? Or do you just want to wait till the weekend or whatever and just like do what you normally do? But it's still like, you know, this is 10 years ago, 12 years ago that I kind of overcame this, and I'm still overcoming it, but it's just not as much of a fight as it used to be, kind of. So yeah.
It's not, it isn't for me either. I almost feel like there's a part of me that either the need that the food was meeting is no longer a need that I have, or somehow, like at this point, I don't really struggle with it, although I definitely have the memory of struggling with food. And so, as you said, you know, in the grocery store, I don't even go down the bakery aisle. I'm like, no, I already know I'm not going to get anything there. It's not good for me. It's going to be a temptation that I don't want to have around.
The thing is that I don't go down the aisle, but in my supermarket that I love, the bakery is just like the whole front of the store. So it's not even an aisle. Like you have to walk by it to get to like six regular aisles.
Get to the apples. Yeah, that was very strategic on their part, and it's dastardly. Yeah, exactly. Dastardly to make people do that on their way to the apples. And
I agree. It's true. It's so ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, so it's an interesting struggle. And, you know, I think that was a really important thing that you said, is that the need that I had, you know, back then, that for it being fulfilled, you know, the depression and the feeling like you know, life was a struggle constantly. That's not how I feel anymore. So I don't really feel like I'm, you know, always needing to fill that void. And that's what it was for me. It was filling a void. So yeah.
Well, high five for both of us, because it's a horrendous struggle, and I'm so thankful to, at least right now, not be going through it. Absolutely. You know, to have gotten out the other side of it.
And for people out there who are struggling with it, you know, it's possible to get through it. I mean, is it like, oh yeah, you just snap your fingers and everything's great? No, but the ability to change is real. And, you know, it's nice when I find other people who have kind of come out on the other side and been like, okay, we're cool now. It's good.
Right. That is not a bane of my existence anymore.
Exactly. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's obviously very personal, so I appreciate it.
I have to say, I'm a very, very, very firm believer in not being ashamed of ourselves.
Me too.
I feel like shame, it fuels so many ills. It fuels misunderstandings. It fuels misinformation. And of course, the damage it does to those of us who feel it is tremendous. And so I really feel like once we're beginning to feel like we're at a place where I am no longer ashamed. You know, I was ashamed of my eating disorder when I was in the middle of it. Certainly, I did not want to talk to people about it. But as soon as I felt like I was at a place where I could come out and say to people, I have an eating disorder and I'm really struggling, it was important to me to do that and to not have it be a secret anymore. And I feel the same way about having diabetes. I feel the same way about the fact that my diabetes is not as well managed as I would like it to be. My blood sugar is not awesome. Yeah. Right. And I know that a lot of people feel really ashamed, like I should be managing it better. I should be eating differently. We have all these shoulds about like what we're supposed to be doing. And I think being ashamed of ourselves just makes that stuff worse. I think coming out and being like, you know what I suck at? You know what I suck at, and I'm not going to be ashamed about it. I'm like, I eat giant amounts of movie popcorn, cinema popcorn when I go to the movies, and it's bad for my blood sugar, and I feel like poop afterward. But I am not going to be ashamed about it, because I just do that. Yeah, it doesn't make me a bad person.
Yeah, I agree, and that's such an important point, is that shame does fuel so many other negative things. And it's like, and the funny thing, one of like somebody, I can't remember who said it, but it's like all these shoulds, like I should eat, then I should, and I should, and then you just say, and you should all over yourself. Like that's like, and then, which always stuck out to me because I thought it was really funny. But it's like you should do whatever it is that makes you happy, and it's like great. And if you want to change and you want to make changes, that's great. But what you should do is just pick one thing. Like, don't say, I should start exercising, I should start eating better, and I should start, you know, doing this. It's like, no, you pick one small thing, and then you work on that for a while. Maybe a while is 2 weeks, maybe it's 2 months, whatever it is, until you feel like you have a handle on it. And then you move on to the next thing, because when you pile all that stuff on top of each other, it becomes A, self-sabotage, B, too overwhelming to handle, and C, you can't your brain cannot manage that many changes at one time. It's just not realistic. It's not you. It's everyone. You're not bad at it. It's just the way human nature is. You can't do that. So don't pile all that should on top of yourself. So yeah.
And in the meantime, like if I have 4 changes I want to make and I've only managed to make one of them, I refuse to be embarrassed or ashamed about the goals that I have not yet met.
Instead, you should be insanely proud of the one that you did. Celebrate it. Celebrate it till you're blue in the face, because you should.
Because celebration makes us feel blue.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I promise that, I try to keep these fairly short, even though I'm really not. My husband always says that I'm like really bad at keeping anything short and concise. But and I also know that other people have things to do in their lives, so I want to keep you here all day. But so we're going to wrap up here, and I always wrap up with kind of having you share what your top 3 tips are for thriving with diabetes, in Emily's world. What would you say that those would be in your world?
In my world, for me, the things that I know are really important for me personally to be able to thrive. I was just talking about one of them, to not ever be ashamed of myself for anything. To keep my promises to myself. So if I recognize, like, here's something that would be a good thing for me to do, but I'm not going to manage to do it yet. I'm not ready to commit to it yet. That's totally cool. That's totally fine. At the point where I say, I am now making a commitment to myself to make this change or to do this thing, I need to keep that commitment to myself. That's part of how I respect myself and love myself. That's crucial to me. And then I would say the third one for me is go outside.
Yes, that's a great one. I mean, I'm writing them down because
get off the computer. We all work on the computer, and I manage an online community on the computer. And then when we're not on the computer, get off the computer and go outside and look at trees and stuff.
Yeah,
I think that's important for everyone's health.
I couldn't agree more with that. I'm a very big nature aficionado. I'm very lucky. I know you live in the Bay Area, which is just, you got all that great stuff. And I'm actually moving to San Diego next year, so I'm very excited. But even in Philadelphia, we have parks. We have a really great park system. And it's just like, even if you don't have a park, it's like if you have a tree, like people, totally. It's just go outside, sit on the concrete and like let the sun hit you. I know it might sound silly, but you will feel a difference. Like it's just be alone and be quiet and be still, and don't let any dings or buzzes or vibrations on you. Like just leave your phone inside 10 minutes. I mean, obviously it'd be great if you could do it for longer, but just be out there and appreciate, the earth. I know it sounds very kind of like woo woo or whatever, but
I had this weird epiphany recently, a few months ago, that I could not remember the last time I had touched a tree. And as you said, I live in San Francisco. There are a lot of trees. I mean, I'm in a city, but there are a lot of trees. And of course, there's Golden Gate Park, and there are trees everywhere. And I was like, I cannot even think of the last time I touched one of them. And so I started walking around petting the trees. And of course, it probably looked crazy, but I just realized, like, I'm really disconnected from my physical surroundings, and I wanted to fix that.
Yeah, and it's actually funny that you say that, because, I mean, I believe that all things have energy. Obviously, trees are alive. Like, that's science. They're living things. They're breathing. They're producing energy and oxygen and all this stuff. And it's like every time I go anywhere, like in the woods or whatever, like I pet plants. Like, not like, oh, here's a cute plant, but it's like all different leaves have like different textures and different feelings. And I'm a very like sensory related person. Like, I like to touch things. Like, it's just how I am. And my husband's always like, one day you're just going to come home covered in poison ivy, and don't say I didn't warn you and this and that. I'm like, well, I know what it looks like, so I'm not going to pet the poison ivy. But if I do, then guess what? That's just a way that I'll learn not to touch that one next time. But like,
exactly. Frankly, it would be a small price to pay for the joy of touching a bunch of stuff.
I agree, totally. And yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a good way to end the interview. A small price to pay for touching a bunch of stuff.
Words of wisdom.
Exactly. So, those were great tips. I mean, I couldn't agree with them, all of them, more. So yeah, I already wrote them down. here, because I always like to keep people's tips for themselves, because I find that they work for everybody, even though they're your personal tips, but they're universal. And, you know, regardless of whether you have diabetes or not, you shouldn't have shame. You should keep your promises to yourself, and you should go outside. But it just so happens that they all really help with diabetes as well. So that's awesome. So cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this. And hopefully you'll go outside and touch some plants and trees and think fondly of our conversation.
I absolutely will. I absolutely will do that.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Danielle. This was really fun. Thanks for inviting me on.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming. And for you guys out there, we will catch you on the next episode. Take care.
Bye.